the skies above are clear. So let's tell the world about it now. Happy days, happy nights, happy days are here again. Good evening. I'm William Pace. Thanks so much for tuning in to the William Pace Show tonight. My guest this evening is Scott Hall. He's a clinical psychologist and a professor at the University of Dayton. Thanks so much for being on the program tonight.
You're welcome.
It's good to see you.
You too.
When you were here last, we were talking about the pandemic, and well, we're still in the pandemic.
We are.
And it looks like it's going to become a way of life and how we deal with it. And for me, I've never stopped wearing my mask. Mm-hmm. I've never stopped practicing social distancing. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to encourage all of my friends to do so. But I have had some who just don't take this pandemic very seriously. Mm-hmm. One particular friend said that it was just a hoax to keep people out of office. And I kept saying, no, you've got to take this serious. And well, one night the call came, and at midnight, a family member called me, and the person was being rushed to the hospital, couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And I just hope and pray that more people will take it serious. But I think one of the problems that we're dealing with now is we've never lived through anything quite like this. Nothing
Right.
has been like this in our lifetime.
Right.
And we are social creatures, and that has been the big conflict for people, because they want to do things, they want to go out, they want to have family members over, they want to go places and do things, and we know that congregating in groups is not the best thing to do. So a lot of people are wrestling with this.
Yeah, they are, William, and I appreciate those comments. On one hand, it's very disheartening to see such a large portion of society really not taking the evidence seriously as to the impact of COVID and so forth, which creates a real dilemma for all of us in many ways. We are social beings, so we have a real innate need to connect with other people, yet the way we've done that prior to the pandemic was very different than how we're having to do it now.
And it has been an adjustment, and is an adjustment for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we're really forced to get creative with how we can safely connect. One of the challenges with being in a pandemic that's lasted so long is that we can have feelings of depression and anxiety seep in. And when we're isolated and our typical normal routine is broken up, we can feel depressed. So then the antidote to being isolated is to get connected. But I have to do that creatively. So it's been a real challenge for all of us.
How to stay connected in the midst of a pandemic. And for me, staying connected is through the telephone. I talk to a lot of people through the phone, and that is my connection with people. And yes, I do miss, for example, going to church, but that's a very complicated situation, and I share this concern with several of my friends, that one friend of mine, she went to church, she was wearing the mask and so forth, but then there are people in the church that aren't wearing the mask, and they want to come up to you and love on you and hug you and do all these things. Well, that's why you're wearing a mask, that you don't get infected or infect somebody.
Yes.
And so what she does now is she wait till the service starts, and she goes 10 or 15 minutes late.
Yes. Yeah.
And then leaves 10 minutes early.
Yes.
So she doesn't have to deal with that. And that's another adjustment too.
It is. She's figured out a creative way to meet the need of attending church, yet also follow her boundaries of safety.
Yeah.
And some people may push back on that if it doesn't fit the idea of how they should go to church. But that becomes a challenge also.
It really is, and you don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to create waves or with anyone. And what some people find themselves doing is not going to church because they don't want to get into a situation. And so what do those people do? Do they? I know many people are watching church services.
They are
on Facebook and on Zoom and things like that.
They are, and I'm so glad that the churches have taken the initiative to at least try to offer services in that way for people that don't feel comfortable to attend. One thing we have to remember when we're going through this pandemic is that we're going to have to set boundaries. In setting boundaries with other people, it's not about being mean or selfish. It's about protecting ourselves. Now, not everyone's going to appreciate the boundaries that we set. Part of us has to accept that that's more about them not liking the boundary than it is us setting it. We also learn that we can't manage another person's emotions. If well,
it's all we can do to manage our emotions.
It really is, and we have to remind ourselves that, again, it's not being mean, it's not a dislike for the other people. It really is about practicing self-care and the code that we're trying to follow to get through this safely.
And oftentimes I think and pray about what comes out of my mouth.
Yes. Yeah.
And before I say it to someone, and I pray that they will receive it. I'm saying it purely from the heart.
Yes.
But sometimes the receiver receives it differently.
That's true. And you're right, we have a message that we want to send. How that gets translated can be very different than the way we wanted to send it.
Well, I always preface and say, I'm saying this with a lot of love. I'm saying this with a lot of love.
Yes.
And I always pray that people interpret that. That's how I'm sending it.
And I like that lead-in that you're using. And one of the things that we have to remind ourselves when we're sharing boundaries or giving feedback that might not be heard okay is first to remind ourselves, am I showing up with kindness, compassion for the other person? Am I being tactful in how I say this? If all those boxes check, then how they receive it really is on them.
Yep.
As long as I show up with integrity and love, I can't really control how they hear it. Now, if the message is if they perceive it differently than the way I sent it, then we could clarify it.
Yes, and discuss it and so forth.
Sure.
Clarify it. More with Scott Hall when we return. Stay with us.
The William Pace Show on CATV.
Good evening, I'm William Pace, and thanks so much for tuning in The William Pace Show. My guest this evening is Scott Hall. He's a clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Dayton. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Thank you.
You know, a lot of people are having coping issues. And a lot of people are grieving.
Yes.
And I think about the people as if the pandemic isn't enough. Then the storms for the people down in Mayfield, Kentucky, and coping on top of the pandemic, coping on top of loss of everything, and loved ones. Think about the people up in Minnesota who are going through the storms that aren't even accustomed to those kind of storms. So there seems to be a big need for help in helping people cope.
Yes.
How to cope in the midst of this darkness that people are finding themselves in.
Yeah, well, that's true, and it feels like haven't been having to cope for a long time, for a couple years or more, and that's what makes it even more difficult. The question of does this continue? Is this the new normal? I think a lot of folks have asked themselves that. And if it is the new normal, how do I then adjust to learn to be okay with that? Coping really requires us to draw on certain survival skills that we have. Coping is designed to help us temporarily get through difficult situations. Coping skills are not meant to run the entire course of life. At some point, we need to transition from coping to thriving. And that's not always an easy transition to make for folks. Coping, how we do cope, that can show up in a lot of different ways. We talked about how to stay connected with other people. Relationships have a curative effect on us. We can also cope with what we do. We want to keep some things very structured. We want to have a solid sleep pattern. We want our diet to be right. We want to exercise, and that can be just walking around the block. These are things that we want to be consistent with. What we do want to try to shake up a little bit is breaking the patterns of predictability. If we tell ourselves that the pandemic is going to last forever, and I'm always watching news that's about disasters, I need to be willing to limit myself on that. Limit the intake that I bring in.
Yes. Limit what's going to pull you down.
Yes.
And increase what's going to build you up.
Absolutely.
And, for me, for like one day last week, when I woke up and thought about what's going on in this world and what I'm facing today, I said, oh man, I'm going to go back to sleep. This is just too much for me. But because I'm a faith person and believe in a higher power, I heard those words of scripture that says, this is the day I've made. And then I turned over and said, oh, I don't want to hear it. and then the word scripture got even louder. And you will get up and you will rejoice in it. And you're going to be glad in it. So I stumbled up out of the bed and got going with the day, But for me, that has been the anchor to have keep me going.
Absolutely.
We can be bigger than this pandemic.
Absolutely.
We can be more. People have said to me before, I'm made out of concrete. I guess maybe I am, because I just keep on soldiering on. What are you going to do?
That's exactly it.
What are you going to do?
What other option do you have?
It's either keep on swimming. And
Sure.
one of the things I say all the time, stay the course.
Yeah.
You know.
Sure. Absolutely.
And for me, those are some of the coping skills that I have. You know, my faith is strong.
Absolutely.
And my belief is strong, and staying the course and what that means to me. There's always going to be something, it's like walking down a main street somewhere, and on each side of the street there's some commotion going on, some altercation going on, something.
Sure.
But it's how well you stay focused on the goals
Yes.
and the call on your life.
Absolutely.
Now, these other people may be having trials and tribulations, and we all have those trials and tribulations. And I think that's what has made, coping in the pandemic difficult, because just ordinary day-to-day life brings on its challenges.
It does.
And trials and tribulations. And so with the pandemic, for example, you know, what the pandemic has, it's a minor annoyance for me, but, you know, when I wear my mask, my glasses fog up.
Yeah.
I can't see, you know.
Right.
And then I wonder, you know, is my zip up? You know, and I look down, I can't see. So it's all those things, you know. But I know I'm wise to wear my mask.
Yes.
You know, it's an inconvenience, but if it saves my life,
That's right.
or better yet, even if it saves someone else's life.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to. I just could not bear the thought that I gave somebody something.
Right.
You know, I just couldn't, you know. So it's not, you know, it's for everyone's protection.
Yes, absolutely it is. And those are all important pieces. The faith, that is an anchor. For many people, it becomes the motivation, the anchor, the strength that gets us out of bed and moves us forward. You know, and it actually impacts three of the main areas that counseling helps with: what we think, how we interpret things, how we feel, and then what we do. Those three areas are what we consider to help keep our quality world moving forward. So I want to do things that are life affirming, things that have
Yes.
a choice in. I want to think about it in ways as not overwhelming, but what am I grateful for? And then I need to do things that lift and fill my heart, showing kindness to other people. These are things that can help us transcend the pandemic.
More with Scott Hall when we return. Stay with us. The William Pace Show through the years has been a beacon of light to the Miami Valley and beyond, taking you to such destinations as the Navy Pier, Palmer Hilton Palace Hotel, German Village, Showboat Majestic Theatre, Ohio Village, and Krohn Conservatory. There's always something cooking in the kitchen on the William Pace Show. Some of the biggest stars and entertainers like B.B. King, Jimmy Walker, Bob Carlisle, Patti Austin, and Mr. T have appeared on the William Pace Show. Tune in the William Pace Show on CATV. Hi, I'm William Pace. Thanks so much for tuning in the William Pace Show. My guest this evening is Scott Hall. He's a clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Dayton. Thanks so much for being here. Sure. I want to, in this segment, to sort of speak to the people, to the viewers, who are having a challenge coping and maybe feel lost in this pandemic, uncertain how to navigate through this pandemic, looking for answers to get, you know, through day to day in their lives. I realize a lot of people prior to this pandemic, because of the things that have happened in this county over, you know, the tornadoes and et cetera, that, you know, people now with the pandemic really are on overload.
Yes.
On just plumb overload. And the thing about it is, some people realize that they are on overload and do try to reach out to get that help.
Yes.
You know, whether it's from the minister of the church or whether going to some kind of crisis care.
Yes.
But for the people who are clinically depressed and don't even know it, can we speak to them?
Well, we can, and part of the audience that maybe seeing this are folks that could be experiencing clinical depression, and it could also be friends who are watching this that may know of loved ones that are showing signs and symptoms. Those folks that isolate, maybe stay in bed all day. We notice that their appetite's down. They're trying to pull back from everything. Those are signs of feeling overwhelmed.
And depression.
And it's important for loved ones, as you say, to reach out to those folks and say, I care about you. I want to be connected with you. I'd like to help however I can. And just invite conversation with those folks. That's critically important. Some people will, as you say, feel overwhelmed with everything in life. One of the strategies is to really take inventory of what's overwhelming me and learn to simplify my life. Pull back from the things that I don't have control of, just like the Serenity Prayer. It's truly an accurate prayer that is a great message on how we need to discern what we are in control of and what we're not. If we're not, we pull back and simplify our lives and then try to stay connected with others. People that are going to be supportive of us, not that are going to get into a battle of ideology with us. That's a difference. You know.
So that people that encourage you, support you, counsel you, give you some options, are the people that you want to be around. Anyone that's going to rob you of your joy or your good sense of feeling, then you need to limit the time that you spend with those people.
You do.
And I know that many people have those, sometimes family members.
They do.
That, you know, sometimes you just have to pick a higher road in your life. Anything that's going to pull you down, you just have to let it go and focus on the things that pull you up. And one of the things that I have received is, how can you help people without compromising your own good sense of goodwill and feeling? How to help people, in other words, without compromising yourself?
Well, you have to think about what is the intentionality behind me trying to help the other person. There is a real curative effect that happens with us when we reach out to help another person. There's a dual benefit. The other person feels cared for, yet we as the person that's trying to care also benefit psychologically, emotionally. So helping others really is a way of helping ourselves as well. We also need to make sure we know where our boundaries are. You know, some family and friends that we may want to help may be struggling with things that are too deep for us to facilitate. So we need to know when to refer those folks out to either a community counselor, someone maybe in the church system as a Stephen minister, maybe the pastor, others that may be better equipped to deal with the deeper issues that the person may be struggling with. But as a friend and a loved one, we can always say, I care about you. And that small micro moment of reaching out could
make
wonders.
the difference in a person's life, you know.
It can be a life changer in the moment.
For example, it could be the dose of the sun that you need that day. It could be, and I want to also talk to other ways that people can feel good in this time. For me, sometimes I just go out and I work in the grounds, anything outdoors.
William, I am the biggest proponent of nature therapy. And there's a lot of research behind being outside. Did you know that 20 minutes outside, whether you want to be or not, has an upward spiral effect?
Yes.
That soil, not dirt, but soil has a certain bacterium in that has an increase of our serotonin. So gardens can be curative when we get our hands in the soil. You know, when we experience the fresh air, even though it might be cold outside, that can lift our spirits. So that's always something I recommend to my clients, is to get outside.
And particularly in the winter months when there's so much overcast, I like, you know, when the sun comes out first thing in the morning. You need that sun. You know, the vitamin D in the sun.
Well, the one thing is that when we let that initial sun come in the morning, okay, it activates our willingness to get up and move around. It's almost like an external alarm clock.
Yeah, it's food for the spirit, food for the soul, you know.
Yeah.
And lastly, are there some agencies or organizations, perhaps like crisis care, if people are out are watching the program who are lost and need some place to call, they can go to crisis care?
They can go to crisis care. If you're on the internet, you could go to Psychology Today. It lists all the therapists in the communities, either by town or zip code, so you can see who's out there and reach out. Community mental health agencies are more than willing to help either take calls or refer out. And then, you know, frankly, most churches will have at least a referral sheet or a resource sheet on who to send, not only their congregation, but others that call in. So the help is there, and the willingness for people to fill that void is waiting.
Great. So the answer is reach out, reach out.
Yes.
Reach out for the help that you need. I'd like to thank my guest this evening, Scott Hall, clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Dayton. Thank you so much for being here. There's more to come on The William Pace Show. Stay with us.
The William Pace Show on CATV.